Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations. Excuse me. I'd like to start off by welcoming one of our new VIP members, BTM Industrial Corporation and owner Douglas Watkowski. Thanks for joining. All right, Brian, we have quite a bit of an agenda today, so let's dive right in. Starting with the Invest in My Kids signature collection suspension. Tell us a little bit more about what was at stake.
Yeah, this was a proposal we were pretty concerned about because it has a nice name, Invest in My Kids or MI Kids, Michigan Kids. And it is, but underneath it, it's a graduated income tax proposal. We were pretty concerned about the impact that it would have on pass-through businesses, those who pay their main business tax as their personal income tax with LLCs and sole proprietors, partnerships, S corporations, those types of businesses. And the signature collection had been underway for over 6 months. And we got the feeling it wasn't going particularly well. But you never know on these things. They would had to have collected really to make the ballot realistically over 500,000 signatures. And they suspended signature collection, saying that they had collected nearly 250,000 signatures. Um, that that's a lot of signatures, but not close to what they need. And so what happens is you've got a window of time that you can count signatures, and as when you go past that 6 month mark, the ones that are more than 6 months old behind, they start falling off. And so that's what the position that they're in. So that means that the immediate risk of a graduated income tax being put on the ballot this fall has subsided. However, the group that is pushing it basically pre-announced that they intend to do the same thing in the future, again, to try again in the future. So the threat doesn't go away, but definitely postponed for the immediate threat anyway. So we're pretty pleased about this outcome in avoiding the collateral damage of small businesses getting caught up in this proposal. And at a time when our members are telling us that they're facing so many increasing costs anyway, that it would have been pretty damaging.
All right, let's move on and talk about interest rates. And as expected, the Federal Reserve held rates steady last week. Did they set any expectations for the future?
There was basically they set expectations that they would follow data, but didn't give a lot of hints for what was expected in the future. Mentioned a lot of uncertainty that is now out there, and there is a lot more uncertainty in the short term compared to what it would have looked like, just 3 months ago. So much has happened in the meantime, and so it wasn't a surprise to anybody that they just held rates steady. And to just as a reminder, the interest rates they control are essentially the rates the overnight rates that banks pay when they borrow money. And that's something that the other interest rates, particularly on business loans, are pegged to. And in a market-based way, it finds its way into longer-term consumer rates as well. And so elevated uncertainty was mentioned because of the Middle East conflict in particular, and then, but a subset of that being the rising energy costs that are definitely being felt. And so basically signaled a cautious data-driven or data-dependent approach, which is not new for the Federal Reserve. And I mean, that is the philosophy that they normally follow, but it will be I would say that there's a higher bar for interest rate reductions in the future, although the market is still, there's prediction markets on these things. It's still predicting one more 1/4% rate reduction sometime this year, and but just not in the immediate future. And I think that's probably a reasonable estimation. The While there is a lot of uncertainty right now, it's not the type of uncertainty that is likely to continue for a longer period of time. It's whether the outcome is good or bad from anybody's perspective, it will be known more in the future on the direction that these open questions go. And so once that uncertainty subsides, the picture in terms of economic risks and interest rate risks will become much more clear. So at this point, in the foreseeable future, I think they pretty much signaled that they're just going to hold steady and watch things.
All right. Well, thanks for keeping us updated, and we will report back when we know more. All right. So on a federal level, Brian, travel is getting dicey. We probably everybody has seen some video or photos from long TSA lines over the weekend. But what's happening and why is there a problem in the first place?
Yeah, it's a partial government shutdown, and I've seen and it has to do with disagreements over passing funding of the government, and it gets there's a lot of different things that get mixed up together. So you've got funding of a particular department, which is very controversial right now, but also with voter ID laws getting kind of mixed up in the debate. So these things get connected together, even though they're not literally the same areas of law. Just one of the things that happens in government. Real issues get tied together. And every time that happens, it makes untangling it for a deal a little more difficult. And so what's happening is that there aren't dollars appropriated to pay the federal TSA agents, the airport security folks. And so they have already missed their first full paycheck. Um, and when that's one thing for it to be one, but the longer that it continues, the more that absenteeism becomes a challenge. The busiest of airports have already experienced some pretty big disruptions. You can have some absenteeism or some people quit, and in the busiest airports, a small number of those absences makes a big difference. In smaller airports, they haven't noticed as much difference, but as this goes on longer and people find other jobs and stop showing up for work without pay, they will get paid eventually whenever this gets settled. Um, but folks taking other jobs and stuff for their own paycheck to paycheck security is a risk that gets bigger all the time. I've seen different estimations from hundreds to maybe over 1,000 or 1,100 TSA agents having resigned already in this, and I think that there's about 50,000, and so you can see how that would start to make a big difference. So travel is likely to get dicier over the next few weeks if a deal isn't reached.
Yeah, I mean, it's spring break time all around the country here in Michigan. We're obviously headed into a couple of weeks of spring break. So, how problematic are things today, and then how bad do you expect them to get?
Yeah, it is I mean, I don't have a line of sight into something that's going to change to make a deal happen. And um, I think keeping TSA fully staffed has never been particularly easy in the first place. And so there is a vulnerability that that these airports have when it comes to um, maintaining staff the longer that it goes on. So right now, when you see in places like Atlanta or LAX or Chicago O'Hare, those are the places where you see the worst problems today. And in the smaller regional airports, maybe not as big of issues. The part that I'm not really sure how big a deal it is, like the real ID enforcement. I mean, that's full in full effect now too, and it's just another layer of things to put in the system at the same time when it's really struggling. So if something doesn't break loose soon, it it could get a lot worse in terms of cancellations of flights and longer delays. Airports are already saying show up 3 hours early. I actually had a flight recently and it wasn't between two very busy airports. It was a direct flight, and things went just fine. But it was kind of in that early stage when absenteeism wasn't that big of a deal. And so I think there is good reason to believe that there will be significant disruptions in the future. Now, let's talk a little bit about deadlines. What could possibly change. And there's not like a natural deadline on this. And so, but what they're looking at is the normal pay cycles of TSA agents. And so the next time they've already a full pay cycle has already passed with a essentially a payless payday for the TSA agents, and absenteeism and quitting is starting to become a problem. The next payday is this Friday. And so the kind of unofficial deadline, if you will, Congress seems to need a deadline, like something to create like here's a line and we got to get something done before then. That would be this Friday. If they blow past that, then this will sound frustrating and ridiculous because it is frustrating and ridiculous. But like if they blow past Friday and they don't have a deal, they probably won't have a deal until 2 weeks later because there won't be another thing to create the pressure it almost be like, well, the pressure's off now. There's 2 more weeks and nothing really changes or matters for the next 2 weeks. So really something needs to happen this week. If it doesn't happen this week, I'm afraid that another 2 weeks of this, that it does actually get quite bad.
All right, so had those headed to the airports, be prepared and be patient, I suppose, and get there early. All right. So, Brian, at the state level, there's been some drama over physician licensing this past month, and it came to a head last week. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, thankfully this one did get done because there were thousands of doctors that are licensed in Michigan through an interstate compact with other states. So that's like this is where states recognize the conditions under which doctors get licensed in other places. And so it would have been a very big disruption to the system had those doctors not been allowed to practice. And so there were disagreements in the legislature on several kind of it wasn't really the substance of the bill, but the process behind the bill, and to extend that licensing. And it just happens from time to time when bills expire and they need to be renewed. And this is one that would usually be kind of rudimentary, and for some reason it wasn't. There was a big process disagreement in it, but it did get passed, and then it was moved through the process expeditiously so that there wouldn't be a disruption in the medical system. So, um, another one of these cases where there was some drama, but what needed to happen did happen before there were more serious consequences to it.
All right. A month ago, you mentioned a sales tax on services proposal that we are watching. Is there anything new happening there?
There really hasn't been anything new, or at least nothing public new. What the next step would be like a bill introduced in the legislature. And the reason that we kind of held our powder dry, because they were talking about reducing other taxes and increasing some, and it was kind of ambiguous in the public discussions. We want to see a bill. What's in, what's out, what's getting reduced, what's getting increased, all that. And there isn't a bill yet. And so we are still monitoring it closely. We're having lots of conversations with folks to help them understand the impact that this could have on businesses, depending on what it applies to. And really, there's nothing new to report. Although we kind of feel like no news is good news. Is that if it hasn't advanced more quickly, that at least wouldn't be a process that happens without real deliberation. That it's not gonna move quickly if it moves at all. That it seems to be going quite slowly. And when it comes to making new laws, slowly is good.
All right, speaking of other legislation, there's a bill that was introduced last week that would prevent double regulation of industries already licensed at the state. So we're going to share a little bit about this on our social channels. It's on our website today, but can you give us some additional insights?
Yeah, there's something called the Consumer Protection Act, and it's an important act in Michigan. It protects consumers from fraudulent activities, and there's a process for it. If you engage in you buy a good or service, and you've been defrauded in some way, you can have some recourse or accountability under the Consumer Protection Act. But there are certain industries that are separately licensed that have separate accountability measures. And so those, ironically, and those the hammer is much bigger. Like somebody who has a problem with one of those regulated industries, that they can lose the ability to operate in that industry. And so these have operated separately. You're either regulated under the Consumer Protection Act if you're, a small business owner. You're either under the Consumer Protection Act or a separate specific regulating licensing body. And we've always taken the position it should be one or the other, not both. You shouldn't be both under this regulation regime and the Consumer Protection Act. So because of some court action and some interpretive issues, there has been some blurring or attempting of the lines to be blurred in this area. And so we're supporting legislation that would make it crystal clear that there isn't double regulation of industries that are already under a strict regulatory accountability system. And that's really the battle. Representative Schuette in the State House of Representatives is carrying the legislation that we are supporting, and we're hopeful that that essentially the what had been the status quo in the past can continue, which is you're regulated under one or the other, but not both.
All right, let's do an election watch 2026 update. We had our final fireside chat in our Road to 2026 series today with Congressman John James. So, Brian, what's the shape of this gubernatorial race?
Yeah, at lunchtime we had a conversation with John James, just like we had with all of the other major candidates for governor in both parties and the independent candidate Mike Duggan. And it's an important part of the process to put candidates especially those who aspire to be governor, together with small business owners so that they can share their vision, but also take questions and be accountable for the environment that small business owners operate in. And the election itself has really started to kick um, into high gear. It seemed like it was kind of slow getting off the ground, even though there were lots of candidates announced. There weren't a lot of candidates that were active in terms of like being up on TV or really socially active and in terms of the paid media. And except for you did see for a long time, you saw Mike Duggan out there, and then that had some real spend out state and just trying to get the name ID up. So polling shows that his name ID is up higher. His favorabilities are higher. He's going to put himself in the mix statewide. Late entry to the Republican field was Perry Johnson, who ran in 2022 and didn't make the ballot because of um, a problem that many candidates had a problem with, which was signature collection. There was somebody who just got sentenced to prison, by the way, for defrauding candidates and signature collection practices. And so Perry Johnson was caught up in that last time and now is running again. And the reason that, even though he got in late compared to everybody else, the reason I think this really puts the Republican side of this contest in a whole new category is because of the amount of spend that he has, about $12 million just in the month of March. So that will make a difference. John James has had a very, very big lead up until this point. But you see Mike Cox out there with some real resources and real spend. You see Senator Eric Nesbitt, who has started to deploy his resources. He's raised a couple $1 million and started to take some steps to raise his name ID. So this huge effort with Perry Johnson, and then with to $10 or $12 million, and not including actually more from February as well. So you have all of these things, and then John James going up with his message as well, and his was kind of a long time coming as well. So you got all this activity that is happening at the same time. So I think about 30 days from now, if there's any public polling, there's not always public, somebody's got to pay for public polling. Candidates will release their internals, but if there is public polling, about 30 days from now is when we'll know whose numbers have moved. For a long time, the numbers didn't move much. It was John James way ahead, and then the rest of the pack kind of running in the low single digits or single digits. And so they're all up and spending and moving, and we'll see what difference that it makes. On the Democratic side of the ticket, Jocelyn Benson still kind of cruising, if you will. Sheriff Chris Swanson is still in the race, but polling shows her with a what I'd say prohibitively big lead. And we had mentioned Duggan already, who his name ID has come up a lot, and so he absolutely has to be taken seriously in this election. It's hard for independent candidates to break through, but it is a very, very active race. And as long as Duggan stays in the mix and is viewed as a viable candidate, I think this election has the makings of a photo finish, like a very, very close election where the difference between the winner and loser is small. Last couple elections, when Gretchen Whitmer won, the margin was not close because she won by a lot both times. And in this case, with a three-way race, it could be a very, very close one.
And just a reminder that we do record our conversations with these candidates. They're available on our website if you are a VIP or elite member. It's sbam.org/candidate series. You can find them there. All right, let's talk about the open U.S. Senate seat with, that we're dealing with now with Gary Peters' retirement. Any updates there?
So this is kind of the opposite of the governor's race. The Republican side is just basically set. So Mike Rogers, former member of Congress, is the Republican candidate, and very, very active, very competitive race on the Democratic side of the ticket. So you've got Abdul El Sayed, um, who's a public health physician, and from Detroit, and then a member of Congress, Haley Stevens, and a state senator, Mallory McMorrow. And there hasn't been a lot of public polling on this, but the public polling and the internals that have been released, they show it pretty competitive. For a while, it looked like Congresswoman Haley Stevens might kind of be in pole position or commanding position, but it looks really, really close to me. And this is one I think may end up being a photo finish. And there's so many that national issues have totally dominated everything now. And so in this state Senate race, the candidate, especially among the Democrats, the candidate who is able to capture the sentiment of their own primary voters in this election, I think is going to it will determine and capture the sentiment of the current actions that are happening, what's happening around the world, what's happening domestically. Um, the candidate that taps into that best, that reads the tea leaves best, and responds to that sentiment the best is gonna win. And I don't think it's going to be as much about organization as it normally is. And these candidates in these primary elections, most of the time, it's about who has raised the most money, who has the best organization to organize the ground game. But the issues and the positions on issues they're so deafening today that that I think it is going to be a message battle more than an organization battle. And that's might sound like a subtle difference, but it's a pretty big difference. And that's why, even though certain candidates in that election might have a strong organizational advantage, that I think that it's going to be close anyway. And all three of those candidates have a shot at making it out of the primary and to face Mike Rogers. So it is going to be Michigan is going to be ground zero in a lot of ways in this election. So lots more to come there.
All right, well, thanks for that update, Brian. Before we let you go today, I do want to remind you that on April 21st and 22nd, we are part of a group that hosts Michigan Celebrates Small Business. This is 4 events over 2 days, and we would love for you to consider joining us. You can learn more about those 4 events, including a summit with a live pitch competition, our Capital Day, and of course the gala where we celebrate over 90 small business owners and their accomplishments. So visit michigancelebrates.org, learn more. We'd love to see you there. All right, have a great week. We will be back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.